Good afternoon. Hope everybody's doing all right today. So we'll kind of keep this informal. So if you guys have any questions or anything like that, you can type them in the chat box below. Since I can't really see any faces, if you just want to type okay or sounds good or I understand, sounds good, or that'll be fine too. Good stuff. So today, before I start, is everybody hearing me all right and good to go? Okay, good stuff. So just before I forget, we'll also talk about, I'm sure if you're tuning in now, it may or may not be your first time. Make sure you go to the survey at the end. Don't just leave. So whenever I formally end the class, make sure that you go to that so that you can get your credit for taking the class today and your PERCA points and stuff like that. Okay, so we'll go ahead and start. So today, our exercise topic is going to be the importance of cardiovascular exercise. What it means for your weight loss and your fitness, and how we're going to quantify and test the quality of your routine. So if anybody has any questions along the way, feel free to type them and I'll address them as we go. Alright, so first, before we know how good our routine is or what we're doing, we need to know what cardiovascular exercise is. So I'm sure most of you know already, but just to put a definition with it, it's activity that involves movement of the body's large muscle groups moving together that increases your heart rate and improve oxygen consumption by the body. And that's over time, of course. Aerobic exercise is only exercise that you can do in the presence of oxygen. So stuff like weightlifting, like that one repetition maximum, that's pure strength. So that's the other end of the spectrum. So things that you can do very quickly like that, they just require, they're called anaerobic exercise. So they wouldn't provide you that same kind of fat burning benefit immediately like cardiovascular exercise does. So doing this aerobic exercise over time is going to help you deliver oxygen to your muscles and help your lungs diffuse that oxygen. It's going to be more accepting of an energy creating environment to help you get those activities done a lot more efficiently. So how can we accomplish cardiovascular exercise? So we have the traditional kind of what you would imagine when you go to a gym, like the lines of treadmills and ellipticals and bikes. Remember, like I said, it's activity where you're using the large muscle groups in a rhythmic fashion so that you're wearing yourself out over time, basically. So things that have become more popular lately are like strength training and cardio together, like doing body pump. To address my earlier comment, weight training can be cardio depending on how you set it up. So like body pump is a Les Mills class at the YMCA and Gold's Gym and stuff like that uses. Some of you may or may not be familiar with it. But it's weightlifting for an hour, but it's high repetitions and it's lower weight. So if you decrease your breaks and you keep moving throughout that strength training and your muscles are on for longer, it still qualifies under that rhythmic fashion, including the repetitions that you're doing. It includes staying moving for longer than 10 minutes. So you can get this activity in however. You can be as creative as you want. But you can also, if you don't have time to go to the gym for a class or like water aerobics or like Zumba or something like that, you can also just go outside and walk. Now, I know it's like 95 degrees or something like that outside today, so it may behoove you to take a class or use a piece of equipment inside. Maybe like a DVD that you can use for cardio, like walking off the pounds, or like a Beachbody DVD that's going to be more vigorous, but we'll talk about that in a minute whenever we're discussing how we can adjust our routine. So the FIT principle is how we most commonly address your exercise routine. So when you come and see us in the exercise department, we tend to ask you lots of questions specifically about your routine. So usually they're along the lines of the FIT principle. So that stands for, the F is for frequency. So how many times a week are you doing this activity? We typically recommend a minimum of 3 days, 30 minutes. That's usually where we'd like to start people out at. It can range under or over, but depending on what you're already doing, what you have time for. But typically like 3 days, 30 minutes, moderate pace is what we like to start people with and work our way up from there. 3 days is the recommended minimum because it's semi-frequent throughout the week. I mean, it's almost like every other day, depending on which day it falls under. If you do it on every other day, which you don't have to, but it is recommended to space this activity out. Just like food, you wouldn't eat all your food in one time or one chunk during the day, so you wouldn't want to do all of your exercise in one chunk during the week. Intensity wise, so we typically recommend an easier pace anyways for your warm-up. Moderate pace is what we recommend just because it's associated with less injuries and stuff like that, higher fat burning ratio of calories that you're burning. But it's really just about what you're going to do. If you really just hate that vigorous pace and it's like, no, this reminds me of gym class and running or sports or whatever, running till I puke, then we don't have to do that. Notice it says the RPE of 9 or 10, which just in case you don't know, RPE stands for rate of perceived exertion. So when we ask you, like on the treadmill test, whenever you first come in, how hard it feels like you're working, this is the scale that we're using. So it's 1 to 10 or 0 to 10. But we typically recommend around 3 to 5-ish for moderate to somewhat hard pace. That's enough to where it's not going to beat you up, but it's going to give you enough of a benefit that you're going to increase fitness. Vigorous pace, that's definitely for fitness goals. I would say if your goals are associated mostly with fitness, when it comes to cardio, then like a good example of a fitness goal would be, okay, I want to complete a 5K. Well, if that's your goal, if you want to do that more than I just want to be healthy, for example, like a more general goal, then you would want to go focus more on getting your activity slightly throughout the day, or like a brisk walk here and there. If you're wanting to increase your fitness for like a race or something like that, then I would say let's try and increase your intensity so that you're going to receive more fitness benefits faster. And now that's up to a certain point. If 9 and 10 is not recommended because that's just really, really difficult, then I don't want you to push yourself to that point each time. that's gonna burn you out. And believe me, I've done it. I've been burnt out, and it's not fun. So we're going for long-term exercise adherence. So how we're going to do that is finding the way that you most prefer to do this type of activity. So we also ask how many minutes are you doing each time or total during the week. So if time is a big deal for you, then even if you don't like vigorous exercise for cardio, then it might work better to fit into your schedule. So like if you have like a vigorous DVD at home, or like if you only have like one day during the week where you know you can fit your exercise in, then maybe doing a class like body pump might be a good option for you, because that would be a vigorous intensity class, but also include your weightlifting. Or if you were doing a DVD at home, most exercise DVDs nowadays, unless you're going for something really specific, if you're getting a workout, it's going to involve strength training and cardio, like those Beachbody DVDs, like the Jillian Michaels DVDs and stuff like that. So notice the vigorous pace comes with with half of the minutes that you have to put in. So time-wise, if you're in a crunch and you just want to do like a quick 10-minute run, that's going to count for like 20 minutes of moderate exercise. So 150 minutes for moderate pace. That's like brisk walking. That's like anything that, going back to that traditional exercise stuff, like the treadmill, the elliptical, the rowing, the swimming, stuff like that. As long as you're keeping it like at that 3 to 5-ish range, then we'd recommend around 150 minutes a week for that. And you can adjust any of these things to be moderate or vigorous. It's just dependent on how quickly you're doing it or how much resistance you're using. So like if you're on the treadmill, then you could increase the incline, which would increase the intensity, but you don't necessarily have to run faster. If you're, say, doing the rowing machine, you can go to the fan on the front of it and move that little lever up closer to 10. Not to 10, because that would be pretty difficult, but like closer. Like if you're on a 3, maybe go up to a 5, and that would make the air, that would decrease the airflow and make it more difficult for you to pull on that chain. So you can work up to an hour for your cardiovascular exercise, but we don't typically recommend that you have a gym session that's too much longer than an hour. Research shows that sessions that last longer than an hour, whether it's just cardio, whether it's just strength training, or both, tend to lead to failure, basically, to failure to adhere to your exercise routine. Again, going back to that burnt out feeling, people feel like they're working too hard to get the results that they need. But again, these results, they take about a month, 2 months to start seeing the results. That first month is mainly you're gonna feel the results. You're gonna be able to say, okay, well, I went up on my incline by 0.5 or 1% or 3%. Oh, I went up on the elliptical resistance from 2 to 5 last month as I worked up. So you'll be able to see differences, or you'll be able to feel differences, but you'll be able to see them later. So just stick with it. And also we ask the type. So the ACSM says it's anything that's rhythmic, aerobic exercises involving your larger muscle groups are recommended for improving cardiovascular fitness. So like I mentioned before, you can do the traditional like walking, jogging, swimming, biking, stuff like that, or you can do like a group fitness class. If you're finding it difficult to stick with your cardio routine, maybe a class might be a good option for you. Because you might find if you go to the same class, same times, each week, then you might find somebody who is also there, also trying to get their exercise in, but may just need that extra support, just like you might, to continue doing your routine. And you might find an accountability partner that way. Who knows? But this is just roundabout. This is how we assess cardiorespiratory exercise routines and see if quantity wise, if we're doing about what we need to do. And keep in mind on the intense, now the time, everyone goes by minutes. The time doesn't change for anybody, but your intensity is going to be different for everyone. So if you're in a body pump class, the person next to you might be using a lot more weight or a lot less weight, whichever, than you are. But they might be at moderate, and if you have less or more weight and you notice that and you might feel good or bad about that, you're just remember they were at where you were before. So don't feel like in a group environment that you have to push yourself just as hard as everybody else around there. Go at your pace. Go at whatever feels moderate to you. Or if you're going for vigorous pace to do less time, then go whatever feels vigorous to you. That's what's important. It's not important that you can do the same weight as the person next to you, or do as many kicks or revolutions per minute as the person next to you. So as long as you make those steady progressions, you'll get there. But it's more important to pay attention to your body. So kind of how we assess exercise intensity. I talked a little bit about the RPE scale. The original Borg scale was, we use a 0 to 10, but the original Borg scale was like a 6 to 20, and it's based off of heart rate. So assuming that in general the minimum heart rate would have been 60, and the maximum would have been 200, for example. And if you were at like a 12 to 13 or something, that would have been moderate intensity. Obviously, it's very general because that's not everybody's moderate intensity. But in a little bit, we'll figure out what your moderate pace is depending on, and we'll calculate our target heart rates. But the RPE scale is just whenever we ask you, how difficult does it feel to you? Like I said, pay attention to your body. That's the most important thing, because I know personally, whenever I used to do more like vigorous stuff, say on the bike, I got into doing the stationary bike for a while, doing like vigorous pace, pushing like 170 beats per minute for like 30 minutes to an hour. And I found like afterwards, like I would get dizzy half the time, and I wouldn't even like enjoy what I was doing. I was just doing it because that's what I thought I had to do, before I had more formal education about it. But pay attention to your body. Okay, so we've got a question. So heart rate's been a bit higher than most, averaging around 90 to 95. So my target heart rate increase as well. Should still use target heart rate. So that's a very good question. We're going to dip into that with calculating the target heart rate. So it is, if your resting heart rate runs around 90 to 95, that's going to be taken into account with your target heart rate range, because as fitness increases, your resting heart rate goes down because your body doesn't have to work as hard to diffuse that oxygen, to get oxygen to your muscles. So your heart's not trying to pump more so that it can get more oxygen through. You're diffusing the oxygen a lot more efficiently, so your heart doesn't have to pump as fast. So that resting heart rate is definitely going to be taken into account when we talk about the talk test. or the target heart rate. So we're going to go through these real quick, and then we'll address that. So like I said, we use a 0 to 10. Pay attention to your body and how it feels whenever you're doing this kind of activity. Typically, we recommend 3 to 4, 3 to 5. That's going to be enough to increase fitness. Increasing fitness benefits further is going to be like 5 to 8, but make sure that you're okay with doing that kind of activity. Or if you're just starting out, like a lower calorie meal plan, make sure that you can handle that vigorous activity if that's what you want to do. If say you're not used to taking in 1,200 calories, for example, and you start out in that vigorous pace, then you may not be, your body may not be ready for that. And it also depends on your diet. So, for example, if we're doing vigorous exercise, your types of fuel change with different intensity levels. So if we're talking 3 to 4, you're probably going to be burning a higher percentage of fats for your energy, because they're highly available and they provide a lot of energy per molecule. So when we're talking about vigorous exercise, when we go up to that vigorous pace, 5 to 8-ish, then at that pace, you're burning mostly carbohydrates. And then as you get up to 9 and 10, you're burning purely carbohydrates. So if say you're on a diet to help with controlling your diabetes or prediabetes, and you're on a lower sugar diet, then you're probably not going to like vigorous exercise very well. If you're not taking in a whole lot of sugars, especially right before your exercise routine, you might get to feel really, really dizzy, because your heart's working to push that sugar where it needs to go to your muscles. So, and your heart rate's going to increase to push a lot more of that. So your heart rate is going to go up a lot faster, and your exercise routine is going to be done a lot sooner than you thought it would be. So keep that in mind. Listen to your body. Exercise within the pace that you need for you. And we can do vigorous pace if you want, but just make sure that if you can't handle that like 40-minute class, let's go at it for 10 minutes. And if you still want to do the class, you can do 10 minutes of vigorous pace and then kind of slow it down. You don't have to keep up with everybody. I know that's the general consensus if you're doing that kind of stuff, like group exercise, but listen to your body, because you don't want a bad experience to mold how you view this kind of activity, because it is important, especially when we're talking about weight maintenance. So the next one is the talk test. Now, whenever you're on the treadmill here and we ask, we'll be talking to you and getting a sense of what you're doing. That's dual purpose. I know it's really annoying. It's like, don't talk to me while I'm on the treadmill, but it's good for us to see where you're at. So if we're on a treadmill test and I've got the speed up higher than maybe it should be for you, we find a lot of people don't like to say, oh, this is too hard, slow it down. So it's good for me to see where you're at before we increase the intensity or anything like that, so that you can maybe finish the test or something like that. So again, listen to your body. Moderate intensity is going to be more like you can talk, but you can't sing. All right. So, and the thing that I typically say is, you can try to sing, but it probably shouldn't sound very good. If it doesn't sound very good all the time, then that's just a shame. So you can talk. You should be able to carry on a conversation, but not to the point where you can just belt out your favorite tune. Vigorous intensity is going to be like very frequent breaths. Okay, so you're not going to be able to say very much. All right, but that's the point. We're getting a higher intensity so that we can get done sooner. So that's if you go to the gym with a buddy, then this might be a good option for you to be able to test where you are if you're not measuring your heart rate. Now, we give out heart rate ranges, and I'll help you work out what yours is today and show you kind of how to do that more specifically than you might have done in the past. But it's always good to see where you're at with the talk test, or where your workout buddy's at, or something like that. So, target heart rate ranges. So we'll go through this, and I'll work mine out while I'm doing it, so that I can give you, or so that you can kind of test and see what yours is. And if I'm going too fast, somebody type in the chat, and if they have a question or something like that, or need me to go back to a slide or something. So we got a couple steps here. So step one, so we need to calculate your maximal heart rate. So this is a theoretical number. So it's going to be plus or minus 10 beats per minute. So if you notice, you go to the gym, do vigorous pace, and you're like, oh, mine goes higher than my theoretical max. Then that's fine. It's a guesstimation. It's plus or minus 10 beats. So 220 minus your age. So 220 minus, I'm 24. So that's going to be 196. Okay, so that's my theoretical maximum heart rate. All right, so next we want to calculate your resting heart rate. So that's where Bridget's question earlier of that resting heart rate running around 90, 95. That's what I want you to use for your resting heart rate. So here it says morning number 1 and morning number 2. Typically we have people measure their heart rates in the morning, and if you have like a Fitbit that measures your heart rate, it's going to measure your heart rate in the morning, like right before you wake up, so we can get a true resting. So whenever you go to the doctor's office and you sit down right immediately, and then they slap that pulse ox on your finger, and it's reading like 110. That's not your true resting heart rate. Even if that's what they plug in the system, that's not your true resting heart rate. So you can calculate this on your own. If you don't have like a machine to measure it, like a Fitbit, or like a treadmill with heart rate monitors, you can measure it on your own by using your radial artery. All right. So basically, I want you to hold your hand like not up like this, but like in your lap. And what I'll do is I'll stand up. So you want to hold your arm out flat like this. You want to find over to there's this little cartilage right here on the center of your wrist. So you're going to go toward the thumb side where that little gap is between your bone and that cartilage, and feel that artery. If you can't feel it, push down a little bit more, and you'll be able to feel that pulse right there. So what you want to do is you want to hold it, and just for time's sake, we'll do 30 seconds, and then we'll multiply that number by 2. But to get a true, then you would want to do a full 60 seconds. So I'm going to measure mine for 30. You guys can go ahead and measure yours for 30, and then write down what you get, and we'll use that as our resting heart rate. Alright, so I got 32. So that means multiplied by 2, my roundabout resting heart rate is going to be 64. All right. So does anybody have any questions about that? All right. If you do, go ahead and type it in the chat. So the equation that we're using for this is your heart rate reserve. So traditional equations will use your age predicted, which was the max heart rate, which is the 220 minus your age, and so many percent of that to get your heart rate training zone. So that's fine to do, but it's going to give you a lower number than what your actual training zone should be, because it's assuming that your max heart rate is at 220 minus your age and your minimum is 0. Nobody's minimum heart rate or resting heart rate is 0, hopefully. So this is giving that age predicted maximum and that resting heart rate. So this is your playroom in here. This is your max to your resting. So this is your true amount of play with your heart rate that you get. So we want that heart rate reserve is that amount of beats per minute between your resting and your maximum. So if we take that out, so for my max 196 minus my resting is going to be 132 beats. All right, so that's what I've got in between there. So that's my heart rate reserve. So we'll go to the next one. Now we want to calculate your minimal and your maximal training zones. So whenever you're doing this, you need to have in mind what type of exercise you're doing. If you're doing vigorous pace, then we need to be working on like a 70 to 85% roundabout. If we're doing moderate, more like it says you get mixed numbers. Some say 40 to 60, some say 50 to 75. I say if we go like a 50 to 70, you'll be fine. But it's all on a spectrum, so you're gonna get the benefit of whatever you put in. All right. So if you want to get more fitness benefit, go to the higher intensities. If you want to get more, if you want to get just regular health benefit, stick with the moderate stuff. You're going to reduce your risk for injuries there. So if we're calculating our minimal training zone, so if I want to do moderate intensity, let's say I want to do 50 to 75%. All right, so 50% of your heart rate reserve. Okay, so 50% of my heart rate reserve is 66 plus your resting heart rate back. Remember, that's the minimum, that's the basement. Okay, so we need to add that 50% of the reserve back to that. All right, so we're going to add that 64 back, and that's going to make the bottom of my moderate training zone. Moderate to somewhat hard training zone is kind of what I'm going for. So that's going to make the minimum 130 beats per minute. All right, so if I'm going to 70 or 75%, for example, we'll do, now this is going to be the maximum end. I'll do 0.75 times the reserve, so 66. No, wait. 0.75 times 132, which was the reserve, is 99 beats. So we're going to add that back to the resting again. So plus 64, and the maximum end of that range is going to be a 163. So that's going to be more of like pushing the vigorous zone. So it's going to be the higher end of moderate. So if we're looking at the RPE scale, I would probably be at about a 6 or so at the top of this range. So if you wanted to go moderate, more 40 to 60, then that can be your moderate range. But keep in mind, these ranges, they're the same, but your fitness is going to change. So as your resting heart rate comes down, that heart rate reserve increases, because your maximum heart rate is going to stay the same. So if you do that, then you're going to need to readjust. If your resting heart rate goes down because your fitness increases, you may want to think about readjusting your range to see how that's going to change. All right, so we'll go to the next one here. So now you have your zone. Okay, so you have your minimal, you have your maximal. Even after you calculate this, if you find like that you want to do like a vigorous range and you're doing like 70 to 85% or so, then you could, if you find that, you know, my body's just not reacting to this kind of exercise well, I'm not getting in enough fuel, stuff like that, then we can change that. We can adjust your range here. So again, I'm just going to keep driving home the point. Listen to your body. So how can this type of exercise benefit me? So like I've been kind of hinting at this whole time, is regular cardiovascular exercise is going to help improve the health and function of your lungs, your heart, and your blood vessels. All right. So in saying that, it's going to help you reduce your risk for certain types of diseases like cardiovascular disease and stuff like that. So also, there are certain things that are changed much more easily with exercise. So, for example, if your doctor's ever told you that you need to get your HDL cholesterol up, you can get that number up by eating like good fats and stuff like that. But it's going to work a lot better if you pair it with a cardiovascular exercise routine. And you'll notice a big shift if you start doing higher intensities are going to improve that benefit, but you'll notice a difference in that number if you create a regular exercise routine for yourself. So it can also improve other areas like mood. We find that vigorous exercise tends to help with managing depression and anxiety and stuff like that more. We also find that it helps manage your weight. So when we are a weight loss clinic, but these recommendations are for all healthy people. And I know we say this often enough, but your exercise routine is mainly to make sure that you're going to be able to maintain weight loss at the end of your program. It'll help you increase your fitness and increase your bodily functions and stuff like that. But you'll lose weight with exercise because you burn more calories with cardio, but you'll notice you can eat calories faster than you can burn them off. So keep in mind, this type of exercise is the long-term fix. It's going to help you. Strength training is going to help you as well. More for both of these are going to help with weight maintenance. So you'll notice, even if you increase your exercise intensity and you're like, I don't know what's going on, like I'm exercising 300 minutes a week at this vigorous pace, but I'm not getting more benefit. This is all up until a certain point. So also notice back in that slide, 75 minutes was what was recommended for vigorous intensity. So if you notice, oh, my heart rate range is in the vigorous range here, and I'm doing that more than 150 minutes a week, you're doing too much. All right, so just as important as it is to know the minimum, it's important to know the maximum, to know that we're not doing too much, because this exercise can benefit, but like I said, up until a certain point, you could eventually stall your weight loss because of certain other bodily responses because you're doing a lot of exercise, and it can be a sign of overtraining. So just keep that in mind. So we also need to talk about progressing your exercise routine. So when we're talking about your cardio, we need to talk about how long you're doing it, or the duration. So like if you're doing 20 minutes for now just to get started, then a good increase would be to do 30 minutes. Or if we're talking about frequency and you're doing 1 day a week right now, that's fine. Just make sure that we're trying to increase that, because remember, we don't want to get all our activity in one time a week, just like we wouldn't want to eat all our food at one time during the day. So frequency is big there. It's also going to help with your adherence to the routine. Intensity, which is what we just talked about. So find the intensity that works for you. And a gradual progression of these variables is key. So you don't want to adjust multiple variables at the same time. You want to go one step at a time. So just like stairs, you wouldn't want a staircase that went one step up and then 3 steps up and then 1 step down and then 5 steps up. Right, so that doesn't work very well when you're trying to go up. So you want it to be one step at a time. All right. So this type of exercise needs to be gradual, because we don't want you to go into like a body pump class, or a good example would be a CrossFit class, and somebody tries to just go gung ho right first day and gets injured because they're slinging heavy weights around a lot of times. It can be cardio, but you don't want to put the carriage before the horse, right? We want to build that steady foundation and then take our little stair steps up. So an example down here is I'm doing the treadmill 3 times a week for 30 minutes. So say we have time in our schedule and we want to adjust the frequency. We want to do it more days per week. We can go to 4 days per week so that we can get 120 minutes. So we're closer to that 150 minutes a week. If say to edit this example, if you can't go 4 days a week, then we're still going for 120 minutes, all we have to do is go the same 3 days a week and stay on that treadmill for 10 minutes longer each time. Same increase. 3 times 40, 120. 4 times 30, 120. All right, so it's just a trade-off of what works best for your schedule. I'm sure you guys have talked about SMART goals with your behaviorist before, or one of us. So it's always important to have a timeline. I want to have this goal set and met by this amount of time. All right. So extra tips for doing this. Always begin with a warm-up that goes up into your exercise pace. That's what we call that dynamic stretching, or that dynamic warm-up. It's going to help get blood flow to your muscles so that we're less likely to increase our risk for injury. If you're limited on time, like I said, 10-minute bouts is all you need to add up to your 150. So I wouldn't recommend it, but if you wanted to do 15 10-minute bouts during the week, it's possible. You can do that. But if we want to work on how long our muscles can stay on, we truly need to increase our minutes. But again, if say you have kids, for example, and it's hard to get away from them, then to do a little exercise break for yourself, then 10 minutes. Go out for a walk with them, or do like a exercise video or something. Maybe one of our handouts, like our body weight handout, that's high intensity. Like I said before, you can, if you're having trouble meeting 150 minutes of moderate exercise, you can try vigorous and cut your time in half. But that's again where you need to pay attention to your body. All right, just have fun too. These activities aren't limited to the treadmill or the pool or a body pump class or Zumba class. As long as you do it at a high enough intensity, you can do anything hard. So like kayaking, for example, if you're paddling, then you can paddle faster. It might be a lot harder, but you can get your exercise in ways you may not have realized it before. If you're hiking, for example, you may not even have to walk faster. You can just go up that hill, and that's going to be enough of a workout to give you that benefit that you need. All right, so the treadmill's not your only option. Just keep that in mind. If you have any questions about being specific about that, then you can always ask one of us, either in the chat right now or later on whenever you have a meeting with one of us or a training session. So I have a Q&A portion, but before I get to that, I wanted to address something that's in our handout. So we have handouts for those of you who are on the computer. Those of you on mobile devices may not be able to access the importance of cardiovascular exercise and the chair cardio routine that we have attached here. So if you want to get these handouts, you can go back to that first screen in the lobby whenever you get to a computer, and you can go to that link, and there will be those handouts, all of those exercise handouts and stuff like that on Google Drive. So you can get to those if you want access to them. But one thing that's on the importance of cardiovascular exercise handout that wasn't on the slide that I wanted to go over is, if you don't have a wearable device or like a machine that you're measuring your heart rate with, then you can use the 10-second count to estimate what your heart rate is. So like I mentioned before, measuring your heart rate on your wrist, if you want to, in the middle of your exercise, just take a little like walking break, or like maybe like a 12-second walking break or something. Measure your heart rate, see how many beats you get in that 10 seconds, and then multiply it by 6. So that way you don't want to sit and measure for 30 seconds to get a true heart rate estimate, because that's not going to give you much, because you're cooling down in that time period. You only want to rest for 10 seconds or 15 seconds, or else your heart rate's going to come down from where it was. So if it continues to go up, then that's a problem. That's an issue. So I would just be aware of that if you happen to notice that. Don't get too alarmed, but it's just something good to pay attention to. It should always, with reduced activity, your heart rate should always come down. So if you measure it 5 minutes later and it's still sky high or even higher, then I would maybe, like, if it keeps going up and up and up, I would maybe call somebody for help. So just make sure you're measuring it correctly too, and so double check, triple check before you worry about something like that. But that's just something I had to throw in there. Anyways, so now that you kind of have a way to measure your heart rate during exercise, you know what your ranges are, you know how much you're supposed to do. Does anybody have any questions about what we talked about today? You can just type yes or no or I'm good in the chat. All right, sounds good. So keep in mind, I'm gonna end the presentation if anybody doesn't have any questions, but keep in mind, stick around for that survey so that you get your credit for being in the class. And thank you for the encouragement. I don't do many of these, so it's kind of nice to know that I'm getting everything in there. So no problem. You guys have a great day. I'm going to end the presentation, and if you have any questions later on, you can always send me a message through MyWake Health, or tell anybody around that you have a visit with, and they'll let us know that you had a question. All right. You guys have a great day. Bye.